Here we are with another live episode, and this is a real treat because here we are in London and I am joined by the unique Yuri Rashkin in the flesh here in London. Scarcely believable, larger than life. Yuri, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's amazing because this is my first time in the UK, and what do? Of course, I call Jonathan Finken. So, Jonathan, we have to connect, and I'm really glad that we have. So, went out and hung out and had dinner, and now we're back, and let's get down to business now. Enough small talk, Jonathan.
And we're full of fish and chips, not warm ale because we stewed the beer, but we are replete with traditional British fish and chips on a Saturday night in a boisterous riverside pub. That was a kind of fun experience.
It was really great. I just enjoy the atmosphere, and I enjoy soaking in, just being here and taking pictures. And I spend so much time sitting in front of YouTube and camera and talking to people and reading news. And it's just really nice to get out and see. I talk so much about Europe now. It's important to be here once in a while. So I spent a few days in Germany, a few days in the UK, and I'm always glad to come back. And it's just been a great experience. So kind of, to see that bigger context of stuff that I talk about.
Well, we're going to dive straight into the politics now because, of course, we're in the midst of some crazy stuff. I mean, it seems, well, we share a certain point of view, which isn't necessarily a common point of view, and certainly not necessarily common amongst those who would describe themselves as Republicans or traditional conservatives. But our view is that what Russia's trying to do is to divide the traditional allies, the US and Europe, from each other, and actually through Greenland and now the Iran war is having great success at doing that. And that actually, if the US were to become completely mired in Iran and, dare I say, have a confrontation which caused it to either verbally abandon NATO or physically leave NATO even, then those two things combined, being bogged down in another forever war, having their arsenal depleted by that, and being in some form of, dare I say, confrontation with Europe, this is the moment Putin will use to cause mischief.
I think it's just self-evident. We see that for different, perhaps not different reasons, Putin and Trump trying to break up alliances. We see that Putin views NATO as a potential physical threat, and Trump views the EU as an economic threat. But nonetheless, we're looking at two authoritarian wannabe leaders who at least, the fact that Trump has said so many times that he wants to act like Putin and be like Putin really helps. Because when people say things, about describing their intentions and those kinds of things, we should believe them. And if we approach Trump as kind of a Putin wannabe, then we see that he'd want to make one-on-one bilateral agreements with anybody. He doesn't want to have these trade, multilateral organizations that he has to deal with. It's difficult because combined EU has a lot of sway. But taking each one, Finland or Czech Republic, as the great Finnish president keeps saying, for a small country like mine, just to be in the room with the president of the United States and spend so much time, that plays into Trump's narrative and Putin's narrative, which is one country at a time. And I think that that tells me that maybe alliances are really important. Because if Putin and Trump are afraid of them so much, well, then maybe that's something that's really worth working towards making sure that they prosper and they succeed, because that seems to be the main big weapon we have to deal with these wannabe superpowers, who United States, of course, is a superpower. Russia is a wannabe superpower. But we have two leaders who are acting in a very similar manner with just different options available.
And of course, the other challenge is that something like the EU is, broadly speaking, a rule of law alliance, and it is representative. Therefore, it's not going to make sort of random decisions. And this is something that I think Trump does not genuinely understand. He made a comment last week about Starmer, saying that he would need to consult his cabinet colleagues before making a certain decision. And Trump's comment not only was to label that as a kind of cop-out, but you could see the clear, complete incomprehension at the idea that a leader can't make executive choices. And I think he has an equal disdain and absolute lack of comprehension of how the mechanics of a multi-nation democratic alliance work. Same with NATO. He seems to think that NATO is his personal toy. He clicks his fingers. Why aren't they doing what I command them to do? He just doesn't get this idea of democracy, full stop, or representation of people's interests.
No, again, he looks at a world like Putin does, and in that case, if you are a leader of a democracy, you're weak by definition, because you have to ask other people for permission to keep your job. What a loser. At the same time, I think that it hasn't been necessarily a cop-out, but it's been a really great cop-out, because when Zelensky in Ukraine gets pushed into a corner about submitting to some other new form of capitulation, and Zelensky says, I cannot do this, I have to have a referendum in peace and all the stuff that we know, well, you can say it's a cop-out, but boy, what are you supposed to do? So I think that Trump is really frustrated. And the other thing here that is really, I think we don't pay sometimes enough attention to, is Trump is a very primal kind of a biological being who is really good about sensing some underlying truths that we, because we have empathy, are failing to see. And he will look at somebody and will judge them weak, and he will make fun of them, and he will exploit that, and he will ridicule it because he senses that weakness. And I think that he looks at people like Keir Starmer that he just physically finds to be weak, and he works with that. When other people might say, you know, we don't talk about certain things, and people have different personalities, whatever, Trump looks at it as a set of weaknesses. So I think that's a kind of a nature of who we're dealing with. And again, if Trump is trying to be like Putin, then you know that gives us some insight both ways.
I've always felt that if Putin was the master at criminal grift, that actually in this instance, ironically, Trump is the apprentice. You know, yeah, people will get the reference there. He's used to firing people, but he certainly seems to have a submissive relationship towards Putin. He certainly seems to be in a learning pattern. I've never seen him really show anything that could be considered a dominant behavior, stance, body language, tone, anything that could show that he's in any way considers himself to be, let's say, stronger than Putin.
In fact, it's very obvious in his body language, because he does perceive Putin to be a stronger man. And yes, I think that it makes sense that with all of the talk about Trump having a show Apprentice that we know was edited all over the place to show him to be, I don't know, coherent, we now see that he really himself is very likely viewing himself as an I think that's a really great observation, Jonathan. The thing that I've been thinking about in this particular context is that there's this dreadful possibility that we don't want to, perhaps because of our empathy, fear of losing everything, don't want to admit that for whatever reason, Trump is really friendly with Putin and is submissive at the same time, as we have just pointed out in the kind of last couple of questions. And with that, when you look at that, you go, you know, I don't want to admit that this is what it looks like. How about I'm going to say that Trump has dementia? Well, he does. He is like certifiably crazy. I mean, the number of stamps that he has on himself to say that he is not crazy, I think is clearly certifying to the opposite. Besides, listen to any interview. I think it's fantastic when I dub his interviews and post them in Russian. People just go, "Is he nuts? This is not real? He can't be a president. Can't be saying this nonsense." Yes, he can. But okay, so that's dementia. Well, if it's not that, because he's not really, if he was truly demented and crazy, he would like attack Russia sometimes, but he doesn't ever attack Russia. Well, okay, maybe he's a terrible businessman, because, I mean, he is. He filed bankruptcy like 6 times, so he is really good at closing down businesses. So maybe now we're just next. Like the next bankruptcy is going to be the United States.
Or the world.
Or the world.
Why stop at the United States?
And or that we can look at him wanting to have some kind of views on NATO and how much everybody has to pay and freeloaders. But those are all symptoms of the thing I just don't think we really want to talk about, and that is his submissive good relations with Putin. And if you pay attention to it, it becomes pretty clear that Trump is acting like Putin's house, like butler. When he comes out and says, the Sir wants us to, all Ukraine there to capitulate. Now, the boss said, you better listen, or it's going to be bad. Oh, it's going to be bad. That is not projecting strength of the United States in any way. And my hope is that when you become a colony, there are people who develop national pride who, in our case, are concerned about us showing weakness or strength, which is kind of an interesting variation on a norm because our national pride has been kind of affected and sense of patriotism has been hijacked. But the sense of strength and weakness is still very much part of our ethos. And a lot of people are seeing that we're being very weak and submissive to Russia for no particular reason other than our president made a choice to do so. So I think those kinds of moments are showing that not just what you said, which is absolutely true about the relationship, but the consequences of this, and at the same time fear, and not fear, it is kind of fear, but it's just the extreme sense of discomfort to admit that your president may be like just working for Russia.
And of course, Ukrainians are treading a fine line. Zelensky is treading a fine line here. He has to be seen to be playing along with the dumb show, the puppet show, because the worst case scenario is the one that I've always thought is very close to the surface. Again, even though many friends of mine said that this is conspiratorial and ridiculous, the scenario of the US completely flipping into supporting and supplying Russia, I think, is a latent threat and has been there since the start of Trump's second presidency. Ukraine is treading this line between making concessions that would weaken them, being forced into capitulation, because it now seems the US position is outright to insist on capitulation of Ukraine, or else nominally wash its hands of the whole thing, which they threaten to do. I wish they would wash their hands of it, but that's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is they simply flip and help Russia. And in fact, it's not mad because in the context of the Iran war, they've lifted sanctions on Russian oil at sea. They've lifted sanctions on Subneft and Rosneft, the two biggest oil exporters. So this capitulation by the US to Russia has always been there, and Ukraine has always been treading a tightrope. But, and I'd love to hear your point of view on this, there are certain things that Ukraine cannot give up, will not give up, even though they have to play along with this ludicrous charade of a so-called peace process.
Well, I think something that Ukrainians brought up all the time for a while and kind of stopped is that Trump promised to end the war in 24 hours. This was something that I think people just were holding him to it, and it turned out not to be true at all, to the point that now people don't even really, they chuckle about it if it comes up. And then I look...
Worse, they say, oh, he didn't really mean it. Sorry. Yeah.
Right, but they've kind of dismissed it one way or another. Exactly. One way or another, they did dismiss that promise, but the promise was made. And it was a promise that was not kept, and if you count the number of 24-hour spans that has occurred, this promise has been broken many, many times. Which is just, normal here. The next thing that I think is important to acknowledge is that we are helping Russia, because we may not be giving Russia weapons yet. We may be selling it to them without our knowledge. I mean, if we find, we don't know exactly what is going on with weapons to that extent, other than, well, we probably have all of our weapons now busy with Iran. So we can't be helping anybody. But we are helping Russia right now because we removed sanctions that put hundreds of millions of dollars, at least $150 million by some estimates, and that's before prices went up again and again. That puts money in Putin's pocket and allows him to finance the war, allows him to buy more cannon fodder, allows for the brutality to continue, while at the same time helping Iran to put lives of American soldiers in danger, and American businesses and American tourists and Americans everywhere. So with logistics help. So I think that there's certain things that are quite clear, and at the same time we are still teetering. I believe we are teetering on an open admission of Trump saying F you to Ukraine. And it's interesting how close we are, because just a few hours ago, like before we met today, I read a story about Marco Rubio having a conversation with, what's her name? I want to say Maria Callas, but that's a singer, I think.
Kaja Kallas.
Kaja Kallas.
Estonian foreign minister, yeah.
Right. Wonderful, strong politician and official of her government, and it's wonderful.
And EU now, she obviously
EU.
chief diplomat of the EU now,
Right.
because she was
Okay.
foreign minister of Estonia.
Right. But what she asked Marco Rubio was, when are you going to lose patience? When are you going to just stop putting up with this? And Marco Rubio got quite upset, but then afterwards supposedly said that this was just all sorts of nice things were being thanked by all these allies. So it didn't even create any sort of rift at all, because I think he knows that Trump is waiting for this, like, we one meltdown away. Mm-hmm. From Trump just saying, F you all, I'm going to go help enough with Volodymyr Zelensky, I'm going to Putin.
Yep.
And it's just
One
been
more
this whole
Oval Office event, and we're over. We're done. Yeah.
And that's really the final straw, I think, to bring up, kind of summarize everything we've said so far, is that we just had a Duma delegation in Congress. If that isn't a government inspection of your colony, hello? Anyway.
I mean, the optics of that are extraordinary. Republican Representative Luna showing a delegation of, and for people who don't quite sort of get the symbolism, the Duma is not a parliament in the normal sense. It is a hand-selected group of Putin sycophants. It's a rubber stamp institution which has not opposed any of his genocidal criminal policies.
I wonder, I haven't really looked into this. Did Nazi Germany have any sort of parliament, or did they just dismiss it?
I guess they must have done, yeah.
Because that would be like Duma in Russia.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like you would not tolerate people. And in fact, someone was telling me that really how this works is that you're not even allowed to get on the roster to even compete in an election. Compete is, obviously in air quotes, because it's not a proper competition there. But you're not even allowed to put yourself forward unless the FSB has some serious compromat on you. They have compromat on every single member of that chamber. Every single one votes with the government and rubber stamps anything. In fact, often the Duma members will put forward far more extreme even positions than the government, and it's used by the government to test out new lines, new directions in which they can take their criminal practices. So it's simply an organ of the state.
I fail to see how any of your Silicon Curtain viewers would go, Russian Duma, maybe there's some freedom in Russia after all.
Yes. Parliamentarians. I mean, I wouldn't call them parliamentarians, just as I would not call people working for Russia Today journalists. That's not who they are.
Right, but I just wouldn't call this an oddity and this weird thing, but I would say this is a sign. This is part of the problem.
It is, and it's a big signal, at least in my terms, of an imminent flip, or the potential.
Imagine if you had Russian Duma visiting English Parliament.
For a start, the streets would be clogged with people protesting that. Yeah, I think a lot of us would not let that pass.
Good to hear.
We just would not.
Because we apparently are cool with anything.
Having said that, we did have a Russian opera singer, a pro-Putin opera singer, perform at Covent Garden, but there was a large, extensive and vociferous protest against her presence, and quite a lot of articles written pointing out how degenerate that was.
It's interesting because I'm traveling with my daughters, and the younger one is looking at, she wanted to come to Britain, but she looks at this Paddington bear that's everywhere, and she's like, what do these people have with this bear? And I thought, it's kind of an outsider's view of this great culture. Like, what is this thing? People are obsessed with this Dostoevsky. Who is this guy? He wrote book. What are books?
That's quite a choice.
It's
Dostoevsky
like
or Paddington Bear.
But it's like, to me, it's all interconnected because it's part of what people choose to market about their culture. And Russia could market, I guess, just Pushkin, because there's been nothing new on those hit charts in the last 200 years.
That's what they do. I mean, that's literally what they do.
Right. So that's kind of, to me, from the outside, it just looks kind of like an unhealthy obsession. But maybe that's just to a child.
So let's dive in for the last area of what we're going to talk about, because we've flipped across a few topics. They are all very much interconnected, but it's not that Russia is this, extraordinary edifice of power, untouchable, be ruled by a stable genius. It seems to me a race to the bottom between the US and this new incarnation of the USSR. Which one is going to collapse first? It's no longer Ukraine. Ukraine is, I would say, strong, but suffering, clearly. But it's stable in a way that neither of these other two entities are. Like an unstable atom, they're going to have to disintegrate into a stable form and eject a few things from their, atomic shell, as it were. But turning to Russia, we had this extraordinary case of Ilya Remeslo, a regime propaganda hack. He has no cachet with the dissidents because basically he was just a tool of the regime to attack anyone. He was instrumental in the criminal cases against Navalny. And suddenly he writes, inverted commas, I don't believe still that he wrote it. He writes this extraordinary 5-point denunciation of Putin. And this goes further almost than anything Prigozhin said. We know what happened to him. And then just hours later, this guy ends up in a psychiatric hospital. It is quite an extraordinary story.
It made me think that I think what we're dealing with here is fundamentally regimes that were never concerned about improving the lives of their people. That was never an objective, and therefore measuring Russia by economic size is ludicrous. Because if you're going to look at, is it enough to feed and help prosper however million people live in Russia now? And I'm not saying, because I know it's supposed to be 140 million, but nobody believes that number, so who cares? But if you look at it as money that is generated in order to corrupt others in a kind of a parasitic form, then there is more than enough money for that. And so it's, and it's always been a goal of Russian oligarchs to make money and leave Russia. So they don't want to actually spend it in Russia. They don't want to live in Russia. They just want to make money. So I think that this parasitic approach can destroy any country. And we won't notice it because like the leaders will be of the impression that everything's going great. They're destroying opposition. They're growing wealthier and wealthier. And our problems are just not heard. So it could happen anywhere, just based on the principles involved. It can happen in the United States, especially if you have somebody who is terrible at business, it can happen faster. Or somebody who starts a war, it can happen faster. But I think that these are parasites that are just prospering, and they're going to be like, their goal is different than our goal, so we might all fail and they may actually succeed because their goal was just to amass all the wealth. And if like 95% of people didn't make it, like, what do they care? So I'm just trying to be kind of realistic to the extent that we just don't matter to those people. Our success, our thrive, our prosperity, that's why it's so important to vote, frankly, so that we become active stockholders and so on. But going back to Remeslo, which is an interesting kind of variation on a parasite being destroyed by another parasite. Even parasite wants to survive. Even the minions may want to have, some of them want to survive, and I think that's why the biggest threat to Russia is hunger. Because if there's a hunger riot that catches because even your own journalists are just freaking hungry, or don't want to die because they realize that they can say whatever they want, they can spin whatever positive spin they want to put on this, but this parasitic being is dying. because it's not able to, like, maybe Putin thinks that he still can suck on and he's got American president and things are going well for him, but for cannon fodder in Russia, it's terrible. And I think that must be more people coming to realization. Now, it's entirely possible that he's being paid, he's being used, he's being spun, whatever. But I think, to me, that's a sign that there is some kind of a problem. And when Putin turns off internet, there's some kind of a problem. And when we're dealing with closed systems, all we can do is just see signals. And I think that Remeslo is a very strong signal, because I agree with you, Jonathan. He is not anybody who we could have imagined or even knew to be anybody who had an opinion that would ever be different from Kremlin, but apparently he does. And apparently he's being taken very seriously, since they put him in a psychiatric ward the next day.
And it's not as if the system is in imminent collapse, but it's a little bit like the sound of metal when it's put under duress. It's the kind of screech of part of the machinery just protesting at the pressures that it's coming under.
It's the sound of the brakes being burned.
Yes.
The brakes are not happy. But who's
doesn't mean the car's going to stop. That's the thing.
And the car might not even stop.
The last one on the internet, because this is fascinating, and to link a couple of things you've said together. This is a system under extreme duress. It's involved in a war, which more and more people in the Z Patriot community are coming to realize that there is no off-ramp, there is no victory to be had, there is only worse and worse and worse. And the longer it goes on, the worse the outcome's going to be, or perhaps it's going to be irrecoverable in terms of the system. They're starting to realize that. So the suppression of the internet, and this is where it's interesting, because almost all Western commentators, including the sort of, the YouTube commentariat that we're part of, almost everyone started debating, is this a sign of a coup? Are they suppressing the internet because the regime really feels threatened, there's an imminent coup, whatever, and lots of speculation. My first thought, and I'd love, because I ran this past Elvira Barry yesterday, she tended to agree that this is the case. My first thought is that let's not assume the regime has lost control, because in Russia that is the least likely outcome anyway. To try and put some kind of framework of a Western popular uprising or political expression is just the wrong kind of framework to impose. So if you're going to shut down the internet, we know he has contempt for the populace, and that includes the urban populace who thought they were safe in their privileges. We know that was never the case, and they would get burnt eventually if it suited the regime. For me, the internet suppression suggests that either this is preparation to give Putin some options, either to expand the war or to contract it. Both come with risks, and he wants to control the environment in advance.
Yes, Putin was sold a bill of goods by Trump, and that's not going to work out. And I think that now Putin is the one who has to deal with the fallout from the fact that he bet on a failure who cannot get Ukraine to surrender. And of course, this is why Trump's pleas get more desperate and more desperate. Please surrender, please. When I saw how he looked and talked to Zelensky, I think at Pope's funeral, it looked like Trump was begging Zelensky, like, you don't know what Vladimir Putin's going to do to me. Please help me. Please surrender. So I think that those two guys have deals that they have made, and they have to work those things out. For us, it's just important to remember that Ukraine, which was in the beginning just the obstacle way to stop Russian aggression, and to it has become something that has became like a beacon of democracy. And then it's now we're at a point, and I don't know if I'm crass or whatever, but it feels like we went from a point of standing up against Putin with Ukraine to the only security guarantee that Europe now has is Ukraine. Because I think that Trump is showing with his approach of going in all sorts of directions and showing how he is upset at the allies and he's going to remember this the next time. Well, what's going to happen the next time? Next time Putin's going to show up. I think that's we're just seeing a lot of the world order that existed since World War II doesn't, And I think that it's very clear for me from the United States, because we see how much our system has stopped functioning, how we see down to history being changed in national parks. We see that this administration has a 180 degree different approach to what a governance is supposed to be. And we see this internally. So I feel like it's an important part of what I can do is just to get that message out, because when I see people saying, well, America is going to, of course, defeat this and recover from this, and won't you come back and be our nuclear umbrella? It's clear to me that people don't understand what United States is going through. But I feel the fact that people can no longer trust the United States is a one kind of a signal, again, that Europe needs to move forward. And I think that Europe is in a really impressive, amazing situation where it has the wealth, and the time has been working against Putin in a sense that he lost a lot of his, whatever it is that he's had. But Europe could have done more during that time, but it hasn't. But it still can, and it still needs to, and it pretty much must, to support, to defend itself, with the understanding that the United States may never come to its defense in time, because it's going to promise 24 hours, or just 2-3 weeks more, or just a couple of weeks more. Just hang on. This pain is going to subside very quickly. But Ukraine, on the other hand, is the best functioning, ready to fight, is fighting army. And I think that this kind of a transition is something that requires a little bit of awareness. And that's just all I'm trying to create, is for Europe to understand that, for Europeans, because it's all about people, to understand that Ukraine is a security guarantee. It's different than what the United States used to be. But my background is also in local government. I was on city council, and I'm a county supervisor. And having been involved with different community projects, I've seen situations where you have a festival, and you have business owners who have maybe money, but they don't have time to put into this. And then you have volunteers who want this festival to happen, but they don't have the money. And so they come together, and everybody helps out, and the festival occurs. This is not a festival, this is a war. But to me, this is an opportunity for Europe to invest in Ukraine. This opportunity for Persian Gulf states to invest in Ukraine as a way to help their own national security in the best way possible, because I think this is what's going to prevent war of spreading to Europe, because Putin is being weakened. He's weaker. He is weaker now. I think that we have some crazy stuff that just came out in our national security assessment that really points this dire picture of Russia being quite powerful and us having to make peace with them, which only just highlights, another excuse of maybe what's going on. Oh, Russia's just gotten magically stronger. That's what it is. But I think, all BS aside, Europe needs to invest in Ukraine versus worrying about building up its own army. Yes, it needs to build up its own army. It needs to have this, I would imagine this is National Guard. But just to kind of end this on a sad note, I went to a flea market in Berlin, and I wanted to get a German army jacket. And there is a German army, so they had jackets, but apparently they don't have German soldiers of my size, and so I was not able to procure a jacket. So I think military has to expand. I mean, never mind. Yeah. Anyway.
Maybe a First World War.
First World War. Okay.
Good soldier Schweik kind of uniform.
Exactly, with the beer and everything.
That's it. And the dumplings and everything. Well, we're going to end it there. We've traced the extraordinary arc of Ukraine going from pleading for security guarantees, reminding people of the Budapest Memorandum, to actually becoming the security guarantee of Western democracy itself, the shield and sword of democracy, and the only country with the willingness to stand up to authoritarians with their own blood and willpower and resource, taking that risk. But also we now know they are going to be the arsenal of democracy. These are interesting times. I'm so glad, Yuri, that we're able to be on this journey, to share these insights, to share positive messages amongst the green ones as well, to wake people up to be in action, because that's what Ukraine is doing, and that's what we all need to do to get through this. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your time in London.
Thank you so much, and it's been really great. Thank you for Jonathan, for the great work that you do. I think that the Silicon Curtain channel is a really huge asset, and not just in terms of views or anything, but in terms of communication that you are generating and conversations that you're helping to continue. I think you are just playing a crucial role in kind of building another bridge, which is so crucial right now when we have so much media trying to disconnect us. I think it's just a really great opportunity that you present through Silicon Curtain to connect. And hey, I think we connected today, so we'll see you next time.